Hello, I'm Beth Britton. I support Dementia Community with their communications work. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our first May webinar. Before we get into the topic for today, I wanted to briefly explain a little more about Dementia Community. Dementia Community is a charitable community benefit society, a membership cooperative that provides learning and networking opportunities for the dementia care community. We are an independent voice and inclusive organisation aiming to help all of our members to feel connected, informed, inspired, empowered, purposeful and engaged in co-produced changes that improve everyone's experiences of dementia, both in care and in wider society. This webinar is just one example of the many ways in which we do this. Community members own a £1 community share in Dementia Community, and membership is open to everyone. So if you aren't already a member, do join us. You can use the QR code on your screen or the link that will be in the chat to visit our membership page. If you're having any difficulties with membership, please do contact myself or my colleague David, who is on the webinar today. I'd also like to highlight a really exciting opportunity to join us in person on Tuesday, the 3rd of June at MShed Bristol for our Creative Dementia Arts for Health and Wellbeing Conference. This is a one-day event showcasing best practice in working with people living with dementia using creative arts. Please use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat to find out more information, and we look forward to seeing you there. So on to today's webinar. The topic today is Dementia Carers Count and Together in Dementia Everyday, supporting unpaid carers. I will introduce you to our speakers shortly, but just some brief housekeeping first. We are recording this webinar, so if you don't want your face on the recording, please turn your camera off. Please use the chat for your questions. We will have a Q&A and discussion after we've heard from our speakers, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. We hope to have some live participation too, so if you'd like to ask your question yourself, please do raise your hand when the opportunity to do that towards the end arises. The recording will go onto our YouTube channel, which is the Dementia Community, so do look out for that. And we will also send you a feedback form afterwards, and we'd be really grateful if you could fill that in for our learning and development. So let's get started then. Our speakers for today are Lorraine Haining, who is a specialist nurse practitioner for Dementia Carers Count, Gavin McCabe, who is a former carer for his mother who had dementia, Ruth Ely, who is director and chair of Together in Dementia Everyday, Mary Mitchell, who is a former carer for her husband who had dementia and a member of the Tide Advisory Group, and Diane Bennett, a carer for her mum who is in a care home. It's wonderful to have you all with us. Thank you so much for your time today. And I think I'm handing over to Ruth first.
No, it's Lorraine actually.
It's
but
Lorraine. Lorraine, there you go. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you very much for having us here today. And welcome everybody who's here. My name's Lorraine Haining. I'm a specialist nurse practitioner at Dementia Carers Count. It's a national charity where we support, advocate and campaign for dementia carers so that no one feels isolated, invisible or alone. Our carer support service delivers one-to-one confidential advice and guidance on practical, emotional and financial issues, and provides in-depth specialist support through advocacy, casework and counselling. We also run online practical and emotional support groups where carers can share their experience and gain peer support from each other. And all the support is free and delivered through specialist MDTs, which includes a clinical psychologist and counsellors, dementia nurse specialists and benefit advisors. I won't say too much more, as we now have Gavin McCabe, who was a carer for his mum who had dementia. Gavin made use of our services when he was, and he's now going to give us a snapshot of his story and how he got involved with Dementia Carers Count and the benefits he gained from this. Gavin, would you like to say hello?
Thank you very much, Lane. Yeah, it's a delight and pleasure to be with you all today, and always a privilege to be able to share a little bit of my experience.
Thank you. So we'll just get to it then, Gavin. It'd be great to hear what you have to say. So would you like to tell us about your connection with dementia and maybe just an overview of the journey that you've had?
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. And I suppose, yeah, it's I suppose the journey was one that evolved over time. As you indicated, I was the primary carer for my mum, who was 92 years old. She had vascular dementia, and she died from that last year. And I suppose to make it possible for mum to stay at home, I moved in with her in Glasgow, and it basically became her primary carer at the start of her dementia journey, and while continuing my own sort of paid job. And we stayed there until the very end, when she passed away in her home from advanced dementia last August. And I would say, like, in terms of the journey, I suppose, to be honest, the journey felt like a little bit of a real roller coaster. I think it's partly because the progression with vascular dementia can be that sort of series of step changes rather than a steady decline. I think it's that series of changes that created for me that feeling of both a practical and an emotional roller coaster. And I think what would happen is that both mum and I would adjust to a new norm for a while, and then very suddenly things would deteriorate in terms of her condition. That might be to do with her confusion or her mood or anxiety, perhaps her physical mobility, her sleep, her eating and drinking, and so on. And I must confess, that was quite stressful as an experience for me as a carer. You sort of hope, or at least I hoped, to avoid developing a false sense of security, but inevitably, you settle slightly into the status quo before, out of the blue, having to deal with something new that can quite possibly cause either stress or distress for both of you. So mum and I moved through various twists and turns with disease, and at different points and in different ways, it progressively affected things like her memory, her clarity and coherence of thinking, her overall confusion or her mobility, and her hearing and her comprehension. But it also affected practical things like her eating, her drinking, her sleeping, and it created real anxiety and fear and low mood or depression. So I suppose in terms of my journey as the primary carer, it felt like there was constantly something new to adapt to tackle, to figure out, and to try to solve as best as I could. And that really covered everything from the initial beginnings of the disease, the symptoms, through to sort of end of life care. So that's a quick overview of the journey itself.
Thanks, Gavin, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to what you've just said there. So on that journey, how did you first come in contact with Dementia Carers Count and our carer support line?
Yeah, it is. I'm so glad I did it, because I think one of the things that I'd wished I'd known from the outset of that journey was that carer-specific information and support does exist. I think, certainly my experience and others that I speak to, it's very easy to get lost in a sea of information. A lot of it can feel targeted towards the person living with dementia rather than the carer. And perhaps that's understandable, and it's important information itself. But certainly it can make you feel ill-equipped and struggling to find your own way through as a carer. But in the midst of struggling to find information that I needed in my role as a carer, I came across Dementia Carers Count through your archive of really useful podcasts that, to be honest, absolutely spoke to my experience as a carer. And to be honest, as for most of us, I suspect we settle into our primary trusted sources of information, advice, and guidance, and then we'll return to them time and again, rather than sort of plunging back into that sea of information each time we've got a new question or our need. And that was certainly the case for me. So from that podcast, our archive, I then made full use of Dementia Carers Count's online courses and groups. And from there, I suppose, my journey with DCC continued, because I suppose building on that core knowledge and the group support, as mum's situation progressed, I suppose ultimately my needs as a carer moved beyond what could appropriately be supported through courses or online groups to information and support that was really quite specific and tailored to our situation. And for me, that's where the care support line came in, and was such a life raft as things became more and more challenging. And I suppose an important aspect for me was that the care support line was a life raft that wasn't narrowly focused, but was sort of really broad and encompassing. So I found that no matter the issue, you and the team, you could always advise and support. Whether or not that was issues related to social services or legal aspects or benefits in navigating different systems, or the emotional and psychological aspects of being a carer, and those linked with sort of personal and medical care. And I think one of the things that, for me, within that sort of spectrum of support, the that you and the team did so well was making sure that whatever issue I was facing, that I was then linked up to the person within Dementia Carers Count as an overall team who was expert in that area. So that I was making sure that I absolutely got the best advice and guidance while also maintaining that feeling of consistency and ongoing relationship. And I found that, I suppose, to be honest, I found that really empowering and encouraging as a carer. And so thank you, Lorraine and the team, because that was such a gift.
Thank you, and it's good to hear that it helped you. That's all we're trying to do, is support family carers. Can you explain to the audience what difference the carer support line made for you in your role as a carer?
Yeah, I can try. I think I'll probably only scratch the surface because it was huge. It was absolutely huge. One of the ways I look at the care support line, Dementia Carers Count, is the idea that is beside you as a carer throughout your journey in the same way that you are beside the person that you care for as their journey in their journey with dementia. So I remember near the beginning, Mum's community psychiatric nurse said, this is the hardest job you will ever do. And I remember that, that rang true then, and my appreciation of the extent to which that is true only deepened over time. And, it is incredibly hard. But at least in my eyes, it was also incredibly privileged, to be alongside a loved one during their journey, to help them make the best of life at each stage, to support them in navigating the really challenging and complex, practical, emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual issues that they face, and to be there for them. That, in my view, is an incredible privilege. And I know it's something that Mum hugely valued. I often describe to friends that, for me, the experience was, it was an unrelenting privilege, but it just wasn't always a pleasure. And, and there were many aspects that were not a pleasure. And for those, the care support line through DCC was there for me in the same way that I was there for Mum. The support line was alongside me during my journey as a carer, to help me make the best of life at each stage for Mum and for me, to support me navigating the really challenging and complex practical, emotional, physical, psychological issues that we faced. And the support line was there for me as a carer, and it was such throughout, and it was such a privilege to have their counsel and your support throughout. And I can't imagine navigating that sort of journey without it. And I suppose for me, one of the other aspects that was important in terms of the, looking at the difference it made was about isolation. So I think, it really helped with those feelings that, we all know that being a carer for somebody living with dementia can be hugely isolating. Either isolating in terms of the information support, like I was describing earlier on, in terms of that sea of information targeted not towards you as a carer, or sometimes inadvertently isolated by others. I think my experience was that people around you tend to ask about the person living dementia. How are they doing? Rather than you as the carer. And yet the carer might be the pivotal person to the success and the viability of that sort of ecosystem around the person living with dementia. But I know that it can also be difficult. It can be difficult for people to know how to engage with or support the carer. And I think that isolation, as the person's dependency on the carer increases, their world potentially becomes smaller and smaller, and that same shrinking can happen to the carer's world, and that can be harmful to the sort of carer's well-being. But it's not, for me, I think it's not inevitable. Online peer support groups were a fantastic way of offsetting that isolation. But I think one of the things that I really found was that my experience as the dementia journey progressed, in particular for carers who are quite isolated in their role and circumstance, having somebody at the other end of a support line who really gets your specific situation and the details and twists in terms of what you're navigating is critical. And I think that's what the support line provided. You guys understood all aspects and dimensions that I was tackling and I tackled previously. And as well as being there at the end of the phone line, you helped me sort of not drown in the complexities and challenge of the situation as it progressed. So I never felt alone during that sort of journey.
Yeah.
I guess the one last thing I probably might say around the sort of impact of the sort of support line and DCC, I suppose, was alongside never being alone, I think you and the team did that incredibly precious thing of making sure that I was actually okay. That no matter if everything I was asking was about mum, you and the others still kept an eye on how I was doing as a carer.
Yeah.
I think it can be difficult to prioritize yourself. I think we all know that.
Totally.
As a carer, your attention can really go inwards, not inwards towards the person with dementia. That becomes your priority, and it's very singularly focused on the person you're caring for, but sometimes to the detriment of yourself. And even if you do want to look after your own well-being, sometimes, certainly my experience was that it can feel impossible given the demands and the constraints on your time.
Yeah.
But I think there is always something you can do. It can be tiny things, but small tweaks can be made to try and introduce support for your own well-being. And so I think the support line and you and colleagues really helped keep a focus on me and my well-being alongside that of mum. So that doesn't mean it gives you, as I said, scratching the surface, but the impact of the support line and DCC was huge. It was alongside me and empowered me throughout the hardest job that I'll ever do. And it's also been alongside me as I transition out of that job. So as mum's life came to an end, as you'll know, I was referred on to the counselling team within the support line. And that's made such a powerful difference as I've sort of navigated the end of my role as a carer, and as I've processed what mum and I actually went through, and as I now step into the sort of next phase of life after being a carer. Yeah.
So you mentioned the counselling there, Gavin. Why did you feel counselling would be helpful for you? What point did you think I really need to access this now?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think the point where I saw it being needed, I probably could have spotted it earlier, but I think because partly that's because the whole journey was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, even having looked after sort of dad towards the end of his life. And it will probably be unlike anything I'll do again. That journey, I suppose, it consumed so much of me, and that was done willingly. And I gave myself to it, and I feel privileged to have done so and being able to do so. But I don't think anybody could have prepared me for just how brutal it would be. And I think one of the things that the sort of realizing the benefit of counselling, the need for it, was helping me understand what I've gone through in terms of recognizing, I suppose I recognized beforehand, that dementia I view as it's a repeated process of loss. I felt myself losing aspects of the person, but bit by bit, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully quickly. That may be losing the ability to do something, or to talk, or think in a certain way, or to eat a particular sort of food, or to engage in a specific level or type of conversation or concept. Or for the person living with dementia, it's sort of losing the ability to be able to fully express how they're feeling. And as a carer and as the person living with dementia, there's definitely, I think, a risk of exhausting yourself fighting against every single loss, battling to keep hold of things that have already gone. And that can be hugely exhausting and stressful and upsetting for sort of everybody involved.
Yeah.
Over time, I think I came to realize that my approach, or one's approach of response, can sit on a spectrum between constantly fighting progression of the disease versus giving into it. But there's a somewhere in between. There's accepting the direction of travel while navigating the sort of navigating and trying to slow the pace where you can, and gently hold on to what you can, and to the value of the whole person that's still with you. The things that you lose are not the entirety of who they are. But I think at the end, but that journey, certainly for me and for the people I speak to and support, is brutal in how relentless and how demanding and how consuming it is. And so often there just isn't space or time or energy to process the traumas that you're experiencing. And there can be that feeling you just can't stop. You have to keep going.
Yeah.
For me, that's the counselling available through the support line has been pivotal, not only in processing the grief and the loss of mum, but also and as importantly, understanding and processing just what mum and I actually went through. And the counselling has been invaluable in that, and it's equipped me now for this next stage. The processing and understanding of what Mum and I went through, I don't think will ever stop. It continues to evolve. But through DCC, the care support team, that's really equipped me to navigate that transition and those next steps with sort of care and compassion and understanding and fresh insight. So it has been, it has been wonderful to have Dementia Carers Count and the care support line, alongside me throughout the journey, both while Mum was alive and beyond, and it's been a real privilege. So a massive, I wasn't expecting to do this. Massive thank you to Lorraine, to all of you in the team.
Bless you. Gavin, it's been a pleasure to hear your story, and it's nice for us to hear that what we provide really works for you, and that experience that you've shared, I'm sure will help a lot of other people's, and I hope that will encourage other carers to pick up the phone and connect with us. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to pass across now to Ruth. So Ruth, would you like to carry on?
I will indeed. Thanks, Lorraine. As introduced previously, I chair the board of trustees for Tide, and I've been involved in it since its inception, when we were formed as a charity in 2019, and before that when we were just a network. And I'm really pleased to be sharing this platform with Dementia Carers Count, because I think what I'm going to say should illustrate that we complement each other and we work together really well. And it's really important that we do pool our knowledge and expertise as partner organisations, because we can do so much more together. So what Tide does, we run an involvement network, and we put an emphasis on involvement because we want to help carers find their voices and to speak up and advocate for themselves and for others. And it's a network for current and former carers of people living with dementia. And that's important because many charities are not funded to support former carers unless they take on a specific volunteering role, as indeed Gavin has done. So we want to connect them together. We also want to reduce isolation, because that is such a high risk for carers, and to encourage them to tell us what matters. So we've got three main strands to our work. The first one is our Carers Development Programme, and all our resources for carers are free. It's a series of mostly online workshops. Sometimes we do face-to-face if we're funded to do it. Online workshops on topics that carers have told us are important. So, for example, getting your point across to prepare for an important meeting, living grief and bereavement, a really important topic for carers, creating a life story with the person that you're looking after. And we have a module about your own health and well-being called You Can't Pour from an Empty Cup, because if your own cup's empty, you can't look after the person you're looking after well. We also run some online carer peer support groups. So we have three, one for former carers, because as Gavin's suggested, that transition can be very brutal and very hard, because once the person dies, everything stops. We have a group for male carers, because we find that men don't easily chat in a bigger group, and they value the opportunity to meet together. And both those groups are led by former carers. And we have a young onset dementia carers group, which I facilitate. And we also have a fortnightly carers coffee morning with which another former carer leads. So we encourage our carers to take lead roles in the various things that we offer. The last thing I'll mention very briefly is research. It's important to us because it seems to be the only sector where funding seems to be available, and we don't have to chase it. People come to us because we have a good track record of enabling carers to get involved as expert advisors. And we've currently got secure funding from 4 research programmes for the next few years. The main one I should mention is the Spin Dementia Plus network, which focuses on prevention and early intervention. And we are a strategic co-production partner alongside Innovations in Dementia and Liverpool Chinese Wellbeing. So I'm now going to introduce Diane. She's a current carer for her mum, who's in a care home. And we do emphasise that Diane is still a current carer, even if her mum isn't living with her or in the community and being supported by her in that way. And she's going to tell us about her connection with Tide and what she gets out of it. Diane.
Hey, thank you, Ruth. Yes, so my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 10 years ago now. So I've been, and that was an early diagnosis. I picked up on the fact that she was forgetting things far more frequently. And so I did encourage her very much to go and get tested. And what I wanted really was the opportunity for her to potentially get drugs that might slow down the disease. So that was really good, and it also allowed my mum and I a chance to sit down and have really good conversations with each other about what she might want for the future, because you know, you just don't know what you definitely don't know what Alzheimer's does throw at you. So yeah, that's basically the story in terms of how she was diagnosed. So the care that I provided for mum started with really just giving her additional support at home. That gradually increased and increased. I gave up my career because I was doing really long hours, and I just couldn't support her enough. And mum didn't think she needed support. So I actually gave up my career, and I started doing part-time work as a domiciliary carer, which was completely new to me, something I hadn't done, and was actually incredibly helpful to me along the journey in understanding sort of how the care system works, etc. So yeah, it then went on to getting some support coming into mum through the day. Then it moved on to having a live-in carer coming in, and then finally moving into a home. I'd have liked to have been able to keep mum at home for longer, but she lived in a fairly rural area, which and she was type 2 diabetes, so insulin dependent. So community nurses had to come in, and they just didn't have the resources. So she was fine with one injection a day, and then she was needing more, and the community nurses just didn't have the resources. So that ultimately really took the decision to a large degree out of my hands. So yeah, it's been a long journey. How I found Tide, and that was only relatively recently. It was back in January. My mum had had a nasty chest infection. It had taken several weeks worth of antibiotics for the infection to clear. Finally, it did, but I was seeing further deterioration in my mum. And I went and visited her one day, and I'd been used to having visits where she'd be asleep the whole time. But this particular time, yes, she was asleep quite a bit. But then when she did wake up, instead of getting a lovely smile from her and just saying hello, she just appeared to look straight through me as though I wasn't there. And I left the home, and unfortunately the home that mum was in was about 66 miles away from my home. When mum was at home, she was only just down the road from me, but for various reasons, mum had run out of her own cash, house yet to sell, local authority involvement. Mum ended up 66 miles away. So I was driving home, and I just felt absolutely devastated, and you know that I'd actually lost my mum for good at that point. And I got home and I just sobbed my heart out. And generally when things like that would happen, you know, losing somebody a little bit more all the time, a real good cry, and I'd pick myself back up again and I'd be absolutely fine. But this time it wasn't working, and for 3 days on the trot, I just kept bursting into tears. I just couldn't control myself. And I went on to the Alzheimer's UK Dementia Forum and sort of looked through there. I had remember I had described to people how it felt a bit like the grief I'd experienced with when my dad died, but his was relatively sudden. But I said, it's like it keeps repeating. And I hadn't sort of realised that anybody had particularly recognised it, or indeed that I really wasn't on my own in feeling those things. And it was somebody actually on the Alzheimer's UK forum that recommended Tide to me. And my first encounter was attending the workshop, the Understanding Living Grief and Bereavement workshop that they did. And I had to wait a couple of weeks to get on to the next one. But that really, really helped me so much. And from then, I've been regularly attending the coffee mornings that take place. I've loved attending those. I've found that even now there are things that other people can help me with, and sometimes I'm able to help other people with things that I've encountered, or advice, tips on gadgets that you might be able to get. So yeah, that has been really, really great for me. And something else from attending the coffee mornings, I mentioned that Mum was placed 66 miles away. And in a best interest meeting, in terms of placing her there, a question was asked about moving her. And it seemed to be that the professionals were all in agreement that that's really not a very good thing to do, that it can be very unsettling for people. And coincided with suddenly getting a notification of the nursing home fees going up. And it was a very hefty increase. For Mum, it was 10% on top. I have read and heard through the coffee mornings that some people have had like 15% increases. And I also heard that local authorities had actually started moving people who purely on the grounds of the local authorities not having the money. So they're looking for cheaper accommodation for them. And that felt pretty horrendous to me, that you could have somebody that was very settled in a home, and yet suddenly they're moving them. And but anyway, so I thought, right, well, okay, let's see what is available locally for up to a similar amount of the new fees that Mum's home was going to have. And as it transpired, the home that had been my original choice, number one choice, and 6 miles from me as opposed to 66 miles from me, they had a place available for Mum. And instead of being 5% more than Mum was paying in nursing fees, it was actually 2.8% more. A home that offers far more in terms of activities. So at the start, it was just an exercise and thinking, well, if the local authorities believe that you can, like before, it was almost just in my brain, no, you shouldn't even consider moving her. But yeah, conversations within the coffee morning, went and looked round the home, and I had a pros and cons of moving her. And very quickly, it became apparent to me that I'd be a fool not to move her. And since the move, she has become so much more energized. Instead of maybe 1, 2, 3 words, now she's often saying 6 or 7 words. And she's not sleeping anywhere near the same amount that she was. And if it hadn't have been for Tide and the coffee mornings, I really don't think that I'd have had the confidence in my own decision making to move her. So I am so grateful to Tide for allowing me a space in which to chat to people, talk things through with people. Yeah, it's just wonderful. I'm over the moon with the move for Mum and the help.
That's a really good outcome, Diane, and thank you for that. Companionship, confidence, all of those things are so important. And I'm going to ask Mary now to introduce herself and tell us what Tide means for her.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Hello, everyone. I'm Mary. My husband Mike was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2013. The process started a couple of years earlier. We just retired actually in 2011 to move to Anglesey, our home of dreams. So it wasn't part of the retirement plan that this happened. Looking back, I can see signs that were there earlier, but we were so busy with our own little school that we were running that it's only in hindsight I could see there were signs. So he was in his early 60s when this happened. So for quite some time, for a few years anyway, we after the diagnosis, we carried on our lives, enjoying everything our music, our singing, our ukulele group, our church life, our walks, our friends, our family. When Mike found out that he had Alzheimer's, he couldn't understand what he'd done to get it, but he didn't feel sorry for himself. He just said, well, if there's anything we can do to help anybody else, then we'll do it. And at first we met Ruth at a meeting in Anglesey, and with the memory service, I think it was. And she invited us to tell our story, really. And that came through something called Life Story Network, which is part of the early years of Tide, but still continues. And so at first we were telling our story. So Mike stayed at home for some years until things got very, very difficult. He got delusional, and for a very quiet man that he was, he became very distressed and troubled, and it became that our house that was once a safe place was not a safe place. And sadly, he was sectioned and was taken to the memory hospital nearby. From there, he went on to a care home. This is very quick potted history. Then from the care home, after some months later, or a couple of years later, he went back into the memory hospital because he was getting very agitated and distressed and wouldn't let people do his personal care. And I was visiting every day to help with all that. And then from there, he was in 24 hours, he was sectioned again, because he was sectioned in the first place. And he was in adult secure psychiatric unit for some months. Following that, he finally came to another care home where there were particular emphasis on certain aspects of dementia, and he was there for 6 weeks, and then it was locked down, which was a devastating blow because then we couldn't meet at all. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of how it was. That when he first left home, he was extremely distressed. He would be crying. He'd be ringing me on the phone saying he's been kept prisoner. His bags were packed when I went to see him every day. And it was a very, very hard thing for us both. And it wasn't the journey I imagined it would be. I thought that, I really hoped and prayed that he would be able to be at home throughout the whole thing, but that wasn't to be, and there were difficulties along the way. My involvement with Tide, because we started to do conferences together telling our story, and then eventually it became me because Mike wasn't able to do it. My involvement with Tide helped me to cope with all these transitions that were very, very, very painful and distressing. Because I went to some of the carer development program courses, learning how to speak up, and to the grief and bereavement ones. And that gave me the confidence and tools to actually speak up in the situations that he found himself. I was determined that he would, if he wasn't going to be at home, then wherever he was had to be his home, and as much like his home as possible. So to the point where I changed the furniture in his rooms and got bigger beds so that I could be with him and we could have some physical contact, because I don't understand why, because you have dementia and you're in a care home, you can't have a hug and touch, and it's very difficult. So we did that, and we got a nice soft settee and not the shiny furniture that you often find in care homes, so that we could sit and hold hands, read together. So yes, I made myself. I was a friendly advocate. Let's put it this way. I didn't remain quiet if I thought things needed to be said. But I made a point of getting on with the staff in all the care homes and wherever he found himself, because I thought that was the best way of his well-being, maintaining a standard that we wanted. So the support and investment that I got from Tide, and still do, gave me the confidence to speak out in training sessions and conferences, hospital and care home trainings. And I learned that I'm not just a carer. I often heard people say, I'm just a carer, but we're not. The army of unpaid carers, and it's huge in this country, and this country couldn't do without them, are not just carers. They should be seen as being equal partners in whatever situations they're in. And I felt that was my duty, really, on Mike's behalf, to actually speak up for him and hopefully change things for him and for other people if need be. So yeah, I should be afforded an equal status in the decision-making processes. And so I have got so much out of Tide. They've supported me. They've given me tools and strategies to speak up and to raise my voice, and especially in not just in Mike's case, but in wider circles, like lobbying at Parliament once, which was very exciting for me because I'd not been there before. But also nearby and near home at conferences far and wide. And so Tide has given me a lot. And now, because I'm now a former carer, Mike passed away in 2021, I feel I'm able to give back to Tide in any way possible.
I think I probably need to stop you there, Mary. Fascinating though it is, but I'm just conscious we need to. No, don't apologise. Wonderful. You are wonderful as always. But we just need to leave a little bit of time for questions and chat, and I'm sure you'll.
Can I just say one more thing that I was going to say about, because I host the former carers group. Yeah. I just wanted to say how important Tide sees the former carers. We're not dropped. And so that we have a part to play, and that we can also support each other. And most importantly, we've made lifelong friends in Tide, especially with the Zooms going national, aren't they? That was one good thing out of lockdown.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. On that powerful note, I think it's time for questions, and back to Beth, I guess.
Thank you so much. Just incredibly powerful testimony from Gavin, from Diane, and from Mary. So thank you all so much for sharing your story so honestly. So much of it resonated with me because I am a former carer, and my dad did end up in a care home. So I totally understand, Diane and Mary, the experiences you've been through. And I think the way you've all described the support that you've had, I think just emphasizes why we really wanted at Dementia Community to really give you guys a platform, because a lot of people still don't know about Dementia Carers Count and Tide. And if you are a professional on this call today, the one thing you could take away from today would be to go and champion these organisations far and wide. Every memory service should be talking about them. Every post-diagnostic support service should be talking about them. And I think that message that you remain a carer when you start to use professional services is really important, and that you still have a lot of experiences to process and a lot to offer when you become a former carer, because our loved ones, as we know, dementia is terminal, they do eventually die. So just a huge thank you to you all for what you've shared. We do have a question in the chat, and it is for Lorraine. So let me just add you to the spotlight, Lorraine. So can a person ring the Dementia Carers Count support line and ask to speak with a specific specialist? There's two more questions as well, but I'll let you answer that one first. So can you speak to a specific specialist?
Yes, you can. Anybody can phone up and ask to speak to the nurse. They can ask to speak to the finance specialist, or they can ask to be referred. The only person that we would make a referral to would be the counselling team. Okay. So we would arrange that separately. But yes, they can phone up and we will certainly. And we've all learned a lot from each other as specialists in our own field. So usually we can help you with other things as well. So yes.
Okay, that kind of leads on to the next question, which was, how does someone access the counselling service? So they would phone up and they would ask you for that.
They can phone up. There's different ways, Beth. They can ring the call support line. We also have a self-referral form, which is on the website, so they can use that and just email that in. And we do have partners that we work with who have referral forms. So from their groups that they run, they'll actually make referrals to us for the counselling service. So there's various ways, but you know, people that don't know us can just call the support line, which I've put the number in the chat.
Super. And all the links to both Dementia Carers Count and Tide's websites are all in the chat as well. And then the third part of Jade's question was, what is the waiting time for counselling and how many sessions can you access?
Currently, at the moment, it's around 4 weeks, which is pretty good, you know, when you look at other services. So, and we offer up to 6 sessions. Most people don't use them all, but a lot of people do. If you need further, we can discuss that. And people do get 6 sessions and then go away and go on with life, and then things change and they come back and they get more counselling. So it's accessible at different times throughout the carer's journey, really.
And I think it's so refreshing that you, as charities, you talked about this at the beginning, you've joined together, you have like separate offerings, but they absolutely dovetail each other. And it's so refreshing to see 2 national charities working together. So I would say an absolute huge congrats to both of you for that as well, because that's brilliant. Let's go back to the chat. So Gavin said, Brogan said, Gavin, this is incredibly insightful and appreciate it. It must be tricky to articulate. Thank you for your honesty. And then if I scroll down, Halvi spoke about South East London. In our professional roles, we see unpaid carers best benefiting from peer support. In addition to training and professional help, there is just something invaluable about connecting with those with lived experience in caring. And I think we would all wholeheartedly agree with that. You've all really articulated that value of peer support. Lots of thank yous in the chat as well. Helen, Lindsay, lovely thank yous, powerful and moving testimony. Julia says she will be championing Tide even more now in DCC. She's always promoting. Excellent. Question from Michelle. Do you cover the whole of the UK? So it's a question to both of you, I think.
Yes, we do. Yep.
Yes, so do we. We're virtually all online now, but we, as I said before, when we get some funding, we do some in-person stuff. But yes, we've got members all over the UK and internationally, actually. We have some carers who are members in Canada and in Ireland and in other places. So yeah, that's the beauty of online stuff, although we obviously appreciate not everybody can access that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're exactly the same. You know, we have got 1 or 2 carers that live abroad, you know, that support family from abroad, so we support them. So yeah, definitely.
I think it'd be worth highlighting, because this will be in Dementia Community News soon. Tide have just published a report, haven't you, Ruth, about you know, how people continue to be carers and continue to care when a loved one moves into a care home, and that's a really important piece of work.
Absolutely, and it's a good example of how the various groups in the coffee morning generate issues and generate ideas that we then explore and co-produce resources with carers. So the issue of navigating that transition when the person you're looking after goes into a care home is a really tricky one. Some care homes are fabulous and really do welcome carers as equal partners, but others just don't know what to do, or don't do it very well, or don't do it at all. So that's where those resources came from, and the report's now on a website, and we're about to launch it in a webinar in June. So yeah, really important.
Links are on Dementia Community website, our events page. The link is there to go and book onto that webinar that launches that report. I've had a private message from someone who's asking, can I check if carers' loved ones move into a care home? Is the carer still able to access carers' assessments, etc.? Not sure who would like to take that.
I don't know, actually.
Lorraine, do you know?
I don't.
My understanding is that, yeah, I think my understanding is that, well, we would hope most of them would have had it before they get to that stage, wouldn't we? You know, we would hope that. Yeah, I would still be, I would still refer the person. I would still refer the carer and just see what happens. I'm not quite sure what I think it might vary from county to county or from country to country. So I'm not 100% sure, but certainly we would try and advocate for them to get that type of support. Because as you all say, you know, you're still a carer when you're looking at, you know, your loved one is in a care home. You know, you're still doing that caring role.
Super, thank you. So a question to you, Lorraine. Can you inform me on what DCC do for EDI, culture issues, etc.? And a follow-up, in addition, what about languages? So the whole approaching that whole sort of EDI.
We've certainly got EDI built into all that we offer. We try to reach those communities, you know, that are out there, any different communities. We've got a very mixed culture now in the UK, haven't we? So we have to be, you know, aware of, you know, how we can reach those. And it's sometimes quite challenging, and we're always looking for people who can help us to do that. So if people out there have got ideas, or they run groups, or, you know, please get in touch with us. It would be great to you know, to come and talk to groups, and or to give us some advice about how we can do that. So yeah, and again, if we get a carer who has got, for instance, language difficulties, we will do our best to get a translator or to work with them in any way that we possibly can to make sure they can access the services.
I think you've got a recommendation in the chat already, Lorraine. I would second it. Helen's saying, good opportunity to mention the cultural appropriate resources, fabulous initiative started by Carl Case. She can give an intro to Carl. But also we featured Carl on our first April webinar. So we have a whole webinar of Carl sharing his fantastic work. So that's probably a good one for you to link up with.
Yeah.
Catherine says, Mary, I'm mindful you had your hand up and then it went down. Did you want to come in?
I was just thinking about the earlier question about the carers assessment. When Mike went into care, because he was sectioned, the fees were paid for jointly by NHS and social services. That probably doesn't answer the question. I'd be quite surprised, really, because there's still that sort of feeling that once somebody goes into care, that, you know, we are no longer the carers, that job is passed over. And that is what Ruth was saying before, with the shared care that we're really trying to raise awareness of and to up the ante on. But I'm pretty sure that most authorities would think that, right, that's, you know, it's passed over now to the care home.
I think that's probably
if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Kelvin, I'll come to you in a minute. I've got quite a lot of questions in the chat as well, so it's a bit of a juggle right now. So Catherine is another thank you. Julia says, DCC, wondering who are your referral partners so carers know how long after someone is bereaved can someone receive counselling? Lorraine.
It's we work with a few memory assessment centres down in the south of England. So we work with Surrey, we work with Hampshire, and we work with Sheffield. So we've got a few, and we've got some discussions going on with them. So when the family attend the memory clinic, they get the diagnosis, they are automatically referred to us. We work with Alzheimer ADSS, we work with them, we work with partners in the Princess Royal Trust. So there's various partners that we have, and you should be able to find out on our website who in your area, that, you know, if we've got a partner in the area that you live in.
Okay, super. And how long after someone is bereaved can they receive counselling?
It's not something we tend to offer after the person has lost the person. If the person is at that end of life stage, we will offer counselling at that point. But what we will do is make a referral on to an organisation like Tide, who would fulfil that role.
Okay. And there are, of course, other
other organisations, of course,
and crews and everyone. But of course, there is probably a huge wait time for those. Goodness me. Helen says, when people call the support line, are you able to answer straight away, or is there a wait time?
It's open Monday to Friday, 9 till 5 at the moment. Normally, there's somebody there who can answer the phone right away. Sometimes they might be on the line to somebody else, but you can leave a voice message, and people will get the person on the call line will get back to you right away as soon as they can. But we usually are very responsive.
Super, thank you. Right, I'm going to break from the chat for a second to come to Kelvin. Kelvin, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, Lorraine, two quick questions. When it comes to communications, you were saying about translation. Do the people already know what translations they can do regarding your organisation? Because some organisations only do certain translations, so they feel the other people feel they're being discriminated against. That's my first question. And how do you break down stigma regarding ethnic minorities? How do you? Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I say this correctly, because a lot of now adverts are being seen on TV regarding dementia. More ethnic minorities are coming to organisations like the DCC.
Yes, absolutely.
But what they want is that word trust, isn't it? They want to make sure they can trust it. And that's where, because I was a person who asked about EDI, because I come from London and we're involved. We're looking about how are we engaging with ethnic minorities, because a lot of ethnic minorities feel they're judged by the colour of their skin, not the illness they've got. And I'm not saying your organisation, I want to make that very clear, but I'm just curious to know.
Absolutely.
But promoting your organisation to ethnic minority, I need to understand what you can do and what you can't do.
I think, to be honest with you, it's very individual, Kelvin. If, you know, we don't care what your background is or your cultural background. You know, if you need support from us, we'll do what we can to support you. You know, so it's very much an individual thing. I think we've got a campaigns manager who is doing lots of work around campaigning, you know, to get the voice of carers. And we actually just published our annual report a few weeks ago, which you can find on the website. We might be able to get it put up here, maybe Beth or somebody. I might be able to find it myself and I can put it in the box. But that's just talking about all the challenges. But again, Kelvin, if there's anything you can do to help us, we would be more than happy to have a chat with you to see where we could work together.
Have you ever heard of PCREF? PCREF. It's Patient and Carers Race Equality Framework. We are looking, going back to what I said, why do black people feel they're not treated equally in mental health? If you go into Google, put that in and put SLAM, which is SLAM, that will come up with our website, PCREF, Patient and Carers Race Equality Framework, space SLAM, for South London Wolseley. That will, and dementia is something I deal with, and I am looking at about the older black people, as you rightly said, who can't read and write English because they stayed in their community. How are we showing that equality, diversity, and inclusion when it comes to dementia? So I just want you to understand, Lorraine, why I'm asking you those questions.
Absolutely, Kelvin. I really appreciate you asking these questions.
Going forward.
Fabulous.
All right, thank you. But anyway, I just wanted to explain to you where I'm coming from and why I'm asking you. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Super, thank you. I think we've kind of run out of time. There's loads and loads of thank yous in the chat, so I would ask all of our presenters to go and have a look at the chat. I can't possibly read them all out, but I think people have really appreciated your honest stories, the sharing of the information, and I think you've inspired a lot of people to go and find out more about what Dementia Carers Count and Tide offer and to also share that. Do share it amongst everyone you know, so that these services can be really well used and be maintained and funded. That's really, really important. So just a huge thank you to Ruth, to Lorraine, to Gavin, to Diane, and to Mary for your time today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So
Thank you.
moving
Thank you.
on to, thank you. So moving on to what's next on our webinar series. So we have a full programme of webinars for the rest of the year. We do take a break in August, but webinars for June, July are currently available to book onto, as well as our next May one. So do follow the link in the chat, and we look forward to seeing you at another Dementia Community webinar again soon. And a big thank you again to our fabulous presenters today. Thank you.
Thank you.